G'day folks, got a huge day planned today. I've taken on a suggestion from a good friend Kat, who recommended that I do a little bit of drawing for you guys. So I've picked out a design that I did back in my 20s of a dragon sitting in a tree in a desert scape. At the time it was done in colour on coloured paper. It was the thing I was doing at the time. So it got caught in a flood back in 2011 and got totally damaged. I had to throw it out, but I did manage to keep a copy of it. So I've made a template of it, and we're going to revisit that thing and see how my techniques have developed over the years. There's many years have passed since then. So we're going to play around with graphite. We're going to play around with shading, smudging, and a couple of tricks with the eraser here and there, and see how it all comes out. There's a lot to do today, so I'll get straight into it, and let's go. So here's the original design of the dragon I was talking about. You can see that it's had a little bit of damage over the years. It's only a photocopy, but it's all I've got left of it. So I've made a template of this thing. You've seen what it is now, and we'll play around with the next one and see how we go. So here's the template. We've got the outlines drawn there. So what I'll start doing first is start putting scales and some definition into the tree and whatnot. And then I designed a border last night that I'm going to try and put over it. So I've made a copy of it, and that'll be going all the way around there, all the way around the outside of the frame. Going to try a little bit of trickery here, because once it comes to this side, the wing's going to come out over the frame. So I kind of like that aspect of it. It's not locked into the frame, it kind of overlaps it a little bit and comes out of the picture itself. So I kind of like that style. So there's going to be a whole heap of shading over the background. In fact, the whole page is going to be covered with graphite by the end of it. So I'm really hoping that we fit this into one episode, but we'll see how we go. So straight after the detail, then I think I'll put the frame in, and then I'll have my guidelines, I'll have my borders, and I'll know the area that I can work in. So, right, let's get this cracking. So while we're running the time lapse here, I suppose I'll take the opportunity to tell you a bit about myself, and we'll discuss the techniques as I'm using them as we go along. So I'm a first generation Aussie, born to Hungarian parents, and if there's one thing that Hungarians like to do, it's find other Hungarians and play cards well into the night. So this is where this is where the drawing comes in. As a kid, it was pretty boring. So more often than not, I'd find myself at mum's side, who was usually the scorekeeper, and I'd be drawing little doodles on the score sheet. I've been doing this since as far back as I can remember, and so I always got encouragement from my friends and family, and never a bad word said, and I think that just led me to keep going with it. And it's just been a journey ever since. Can't really remember a time when there wasn't a pencil in my hand, I suppose. So here we go with the framework. This actually took about, I think I had about 5 or 6 goes at this. I drew the same thing over and over again, and then just tried different techniques of shading and blocking in, and just seeing what I liked at the end of it. I didn't really come up with any hard and fast idea by the end of it. So once again, I'm kind of winging it. Seems to be the way I roll with things. So there'll be a lot of things. I'll point them out as I go, but there's no definite plan as to how some things are going to end up. You can see now as I'm doing the bottom half of the framework there that there's a big gap between the two floral arrangements in the middle there. So at this point I hadn't decided what I was going to put in there. last piece. As we come around to the wing there, it's always a little bit hard because I've got the full design there, so I have to make sure that I don't space out, and I remain aware of that the wing is going to overlap there, and make sure that I don't put the border design over the top of it. That would be moderately tragic. So adding a little bit of definition to the scales now. That's the individual scale, and then I'll go and put my shading in. So I tend to work with lighter pencils first, and if it works out okay, then I leave it. But otherwise, it's just to give me an idea of where the light's going to hit. I don't claim to be a professional as far as throwing light in pictures goes, but I've got a rough idea of what's needed, and then just keep working it over later on. So I revisit the same things so many times, and either highlight it or dull it down. You can see the lights change a little bit here. We're working in a studio with laser light in the ceiling here, and we have got plans to build a draft table, which hopefully will be coming in episodes not too far down the track. And so we'll get this lighting arrangement sorted out. Everyone's got to start somewhere. So once again, this is only just to give me an idea of where light's going to be cast. I don't know whether the footage shows it or not, but by the end of the picture, I'm only putting in certain amounts onto that branch there to give the idea of light getting cast around. But you'll see later on that there's a sun behind that tree, so there wouldn't be that light there. You'd just see total darkness if you put the sun in the background of a tree there. So that'll end up completely dark by the end of it. But I hadn't decided that at this stage. So this is where the smudging comes into its own. This is where you get a really good example of what's capable with it. So you don't have to be all that good at your shading with your pencil. The smudging stick does a lot of it for you. You still have to make sure that you don't leave too sharp a line. You still have to shade out a little bit, but it's not as bad as working without it. So here we go. You see that it just creates that mist. It's absolutely beautiful. I love using them. If you haven't had a play around with them before, give it a go. You love it, guaranteed. They're available at most art shops or craft shops and whatnot. With drawing with graphite, the scariest thing is to try and decide what you're going to use for the foreground. Is the foreground going to be darker? Is the background going to be darker? How do I contrast it? If you start too dark in the foreground and you want the background to be dark, then you've kind of left yourself in a hole, and it's a bit hard to get into. So it's I wouldn't say that I'm skilled at it. Most of it's luck. Just dive straight in and have a go. although this one is relatively easy because he will have the sun behind him, so that makes most of the things in front of the sun fairly sort of dark if you were to look at him in that perspective. So here we go with the border. I'd love to tell you what grade of pencil that I used for the border, but I think it was a 3B maybe, and then I work over it again with coming out further to lighten it off with I think it was a HB maybe. And if it was just feathering off there, I'd just be happy with the 3B and then just take it off into nothing. But the fact is that the whole background is going to be covered with graphite. So to use a smudger, you need to fill it in somehow. And you can see I had just a really light outline of the sun in the background there, and you can see it's starting to come into prominence now. Just working in a little bit more with the H or HB, whatever I used, just to get a little bit of colour in there. Sometimes you can use a smudger without it because the graphite that it's picked up the last time you used it, sometimes it's enough to do the little bit that you want. So now using the rubber, I'm going to try and clean it up a little bit and come back out into the picture to represent sunlight, or beams of rays of sun. That's what I'm looking for, that's the word. So I'm fairly messy with this. It's not a clean scrape back because if you just do it sort of here and there and kind of stagger it, you end up, all the bits that the eraser didn't get kind of leaves a little bit of almost a blotchy, smoky effect, and it's really awesome. You wouldn't be able to do that with a pencil. The randomness of the eraser removing the graphite just lends itself to that effect. I really love it. I've done it in a fair few pictures. So at this point I finally had a brainwave and figured out what I'm going to do in these gaps. So now this is off the cuff as well. I hadn't planned this, so this is just as I've been going along. I've been thinking about my next move as I was doing those circles, and just decided to darken it off to in between where I'd been rubbing it away to give it a bit more of a highlight. This was a little bit of a gamble, but I think it paid off. So once again, I didn't know how I was going to handle all of these rocks and whatnot in the foreground there, so this was all off the cuff. Chucking a few more blades of grass as you go along. And now the tedious part, which I should have done first. So this goes on for a fair whack, so I'll take this opportunity to tell you another little story. When I was in my late 20s, I rented a house down in Melbourne next to these two brothers, Mark and Darren Tadgell, and it wasn't long before we struck up a friendship, and we did all kinds of crazy things together. We even ran in a rock band for a little while and managed to gig a few pubs here and there. It was an awesome time. But anyway, these two are trained artists, and hanging around with these guys and seeing their work, working into the shed after work and having a beer with them and whatnot, and to see the art progress, and I really learnt a lot off them, and more than I've ever given them credit for, unfortunately, but I suppose I'll know now. And just seeing their techniques, the way their work blossomed, the tools that they used, and I learnt very quickly that it was important to have good quality pencils and the likes, or whatever medium you use, and just buy the good stuff. The cheap Chinese stuff just doesn't cut it. So I was always a drawer myself, so I went straight out and bought myself I think the biggest pack of Derwents that I could find, and just progressed overnight and learning how to blend the colours, and I always forget which ones they were. The artists, I think they were the artists, and you could really work the colours in at the time, and like I said, just blossomed overnight. In fact, so Mark's got a whole heap of stuff online at the moment that you can go and see, and I've put a link in the description down below, so go and check that out if you like, and you can see where some of my inspiration come from, I suppose. So here we are coming to the close. I will say again, we will work on the light in future episodes, but for now, hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll leave you be for the final few seconds, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, eh?